Welcome to the Pennsylvania Department of Education Accelerated Learning online series. In this video, we will continue to focus on how school leaders can design a system of scaffolded supports, and we will talk about opportunities for additional acceleration. So as we think about additional opportunities for acceleration, a key component to consider is how can school leaders provide additional scaffolded supports through summer and after school high dosage tutoring opportunities? How can these help to accelerate learning for students? As we think about key components of additional accelerated learning opportunities, how can we as school leaders provide the students who are at the greatest risk with additional scaffolded supports tied to key content that can accelerate learning in both reading and math? In this video, we'll focus on two primary ways that can be accomplished. First, we'll learn a little bit more about acceleration academies. So acceleration academies can provide students who are experiencing difficulty with some targeted small group instruction in a single subject area that are delivered by teachers over week-long vacation breaks or other times that fit during this outside of the typical school calendar. We'll also consider ways that high dosage tutoring, again tied to that critical classroom content, has been found to improve outcomes for students in core classes. One of the most impactful and easiest to provide supplemental supports for students who need acceleration in their learning is to provide additional guided practice that goes beyond and is in addition to core instruction. This can help to serve to extend the explicit instruction cycle, or as we think about the work of explicit instruction in Archer and Hughes, the I do, we do, you do.
So what options exist for accelerating learning? We're going to be sharing specifically about two: acceleration academies and tutoring, high dosage tutoring. And we're going to be talking about them at the same time so that we can compare and contrast those options. Acceleration academies are going to handle larger groups of students. What we've seen is examples of this in action that are handling about 10 kids, 10 students per group. Whereas if we were doing tutoring, we would want a smaller group of kids in that 1 to 5 range. One of the biggest differences between acceleration academies and tutoring isn't just group size, it's when they're provided. Acceleration academies are outside of the normal school day. We see examples of them happening between typical school sessions. So in the summer or in the fall and the winter, anytime that there's an elongated break from school, there can be an opportunity for an acceleration academy. At the same time, you can extend acceleration academies over weekends to provide additional educational opportunities for students. That's different than in tutoring. In high dosage tutoring, we are going to provide that during or right around the school day. So we might do it right before or right after school, or we might work it in somehow during the school day. Acceleration academies are long. They're going to last about half a day. We see examples running in that 5 to 6 hour range. So outside of a normal school day, there is a lot of extra time that students have to work in a very structured scope and sequence. So we think about an acceleration academy, it's kind of like a pre-planned course that is going to accelerate learning for students, that is going to close gaps, and support them in school. Tutoring, on the other hand, is going to meet more frequently, maybe for a longer duration of time in terms of a start date and an end date, but shorter sessions each time they meet. So you might meet for 15 minutes before school for the first semester for a tutoring opportunity, whereas an acceleration academy might meet for 4.5 hours a day for the 5 days leading up to the start of the school year. Tutoring is also less structured than an acceleration academy. In an acceleration academy, you're likely to have a very specific scope and sequence that students would sign up for that academy based on that scope and sequence supporting their needs. Tutoring, there's a lot more flexibility, and we're providing more individualized supports. So what students need at that time is then supported, and that's more easily done because this is a smaller group of students. It's wrapped around the school day, so it can be more in tune with what happened that day at school or what's going to happen tomorrow at school. And they're shorter, more frequent sessions, which allow tutoring to really support core instruction. Acceleration academies are larger groups of students during elongated breaks of school that last a longer amount of time and have a more structured scope and sequence. Those are the two basic options. Why would we want to provide these options to students? What are the benefits, or why would we decide to use one over the other? Acceleration academies seem to be especially beneficial for English learners. One of the reasons they believe this is true is because there's a smaller group of students in about that 10 range of students in the Acceleration Academy. So they get a lot more individualized attention, and in a smaller group, a lot more opportunities to practice speaking and listening to their peers. Acceleration academies are also beneficial when there's large groups of students with very similar needs. Those similar needs can be the focal point of the scope and sequence, and then we can get a large number of students' needs met by getting them into the Acceleration Academy. An Acceleration Academy also supports core instruction, but the supports are provided before core instruction. So if we thought about maybe a 1-week Acceleration Academy prior to the start of the school year, that Acceleration Academy is meant to provide student support before it happens in core instruction or before the first day of school happens. And Acceleration Academies are more cost effective than tutoring because we have a structured scope and sequence, because there is a larger duration of time with a larger group of students. You are able to more cost effectively meet needs of students rather than providing tutoring. But tutoring has its benefits as well. Tutoring is really good for when we have fewer students, or we have students that need more consistent supports. They need that more daily, short, frequent session to keep them on track. Support for tutoring can be after or in conjunction with core instruction, or maybe even support them in tutoring for what's going to happen the next day and a little bit of preview. And tutoring is also much more individualized than an Acceleration Academy. So why might we consider an Acceleration Academy? We have large groups of students with similar needs, and it's more cost effective. Why might we consider providing tutoring opportunities? We need to have smaller groups of students with more individualized supports being provided, and we need to provide tutoring because students are going to need these types of short, frequent daily supports to help keep them on track and successful in core instruction. So when are these options provided? Remember, Acceleration Academies typically happen outside of the normal school day. So we think about these elongated breaks. Maybe we run summer academies, and that could happen maybe for a month out of the summer or 2 weeks, whatever time we can carve out of the summer to accelerate learning and close gaps before the start of the next academic year. The other option that we've seen illustrated by schools is Saturday academies. Students enroll in an additional course for them, and every Saturday, they attend, and typically those are going to last for a marking period. And the intent is to keep kids on track throughout the course of that marking period. Now, again, there is a structured scope and sequence to what would happen during that summer academy or that Saturday academy. The other thing that can happen is you can think about any elongated break. So what do we do over Thanksgiving break or winter break or spring break? During those times when students aren't typically in school, is that an opportunity to provide an acceleration academy that students could be part of? Tutoring is going to be more tightly aligned with the school day. It might be a short session before or after school, or we might even be able to work it into the schedule that the school provides so that we can meet students' needs on a shorter, more frequent basis. How we provide these options is very similar because in either case, we want to make sure that teachers are provided training on evidence-based instructional practices. Whether it is a tutoring session or an accelerated learning academy, we have to prioritize explicit instruction and specific corrective feedback. We want to make sure that we provide opportunities for student engagement. Those instructional pieces are critical, no matter the structure that we're using to deliver those effective instructional practices. We also want to make sure that we leverage these opportunities to not just build strong relationships with students, but also their families, also their caregivers. This is an opportunity really to support the larger community. And we want to make sure that we do that and we communicate that with them. We can fit these within the existing schedule or provide them outside of that typical day. And one of the other things that's common is we want to use assessment data to target those opportunities. So what do our universal screening, what does our benchmark data, what do our state standardized assessments, how do those things impact what we might prioritize for a structured acceleration academy? Or if we have school data that suggests that some students might benefit from tutoring, how can we provide those supports to those students? An additional thing to consider is how can we use assessment data to determine the success of these opportunities that we're providing to students.
There are a number of questions to consider as a school leader, as you may be thinking about what additional scaffolded supports could be provided. So first, as we just thought about, how might our school use data to determine what additional scaffolded supports could be provided to students that are most at risk in key content areas through high-dosage tutoring or acceleration academies. So a key here is really to look at school-wide data, look and see, are there areas and groups of students who are most at risk for reading, for math, and determine, is high-dosage tutoring going to be the most effective, dependent upon the number of students and their needs, or will acceleration academies be most effective, or perhaps a combination of both? Another question to consider is, how will your school engage in the assess, analyze, interpret, instruct, reflect, and monitor process to determine not only which students need additional support outside of the typical class day, but also how to determine when they have made sufficient progress. How do you know when what you're implementing is working to help students make improvements in those skills? Some additional important questions to consider. How might our school identify current staff substitutes or recent retirees to provide these necessary additional scaffolded supports after school or during break? One thing that is a common concern across schools in Pennsylvania is lack of substitutes. Additionally, with all of the demands and extra asks of the classroom teacher across the past year, with shifting from virtual instruction to hybrid and all the uncertainty, many teachers are at their limit, and they may not be available or interested in providing additional supports. So how might you leverage other resources? Another question to consider is, how might our school partner with local colleges and universities, educators in training, or community partners to identify educational staff who can provide additional scaffolded support after school or during breaks? These are really some great opportunities to tap into the experience of current staff who may be available and interested to provide these supports. Substitutes, if you have substitutes to actually do this, how might you be able to leverage them, train them on how to provide the interventions needed through acceleration academies or high dosage tutoring, even our really experienced recent retirees that may have an interest in doing this. This is also a great way to partner with local colleges and universities. So teacher training programs. Consider other programs outside of teacher programs. For example, school psychologists are trained in providing intervention. Speech and language pathologists are also trained in providing intervention. So think about any local college or university with educators in training that may be able to work outside of the typical school day. Great experience for them, building those connections as well as helping your students. Are there community partners in your area that you can identify to provide some training and additional supports for students after school or during breaks through acceleration academies or high dosage tutoring? So it's time to think outside the box a little bit, and how might we leverage resources outside of our typical school staff to help in this work? There are a number of resources on your accelerated learning guide. We'll highlight a couple here. The Ed Research for Recovery brief provides some additional information on high impact recovering strategies, including accelerated learning, as well as high dosage tutoring through after school programs. Another helpful resource from the Council for Exceptional Children and the Cedar Center provide some summaries of the research on important instructional practices, including mathematics and how explicit instruction helps to result in large improvements of students' learning. So be sure to check out the resources on your learning guide. So thank you for joining the Scaffolded Supports Additional Accelerated Opportunities recording session. So it is important, if you would like to submit your attendance for this session, you can use the Google form and the tiny URL by typing in tinyurl.com/P, D, E, accelerate, or you can use the direct link to the form. Additionally, you may use your smartphone or smart device and scan the QR code you see on your screen. Both the links and the QR code direct you to the same form. Once you get to the form, it will ask for some identifying information to record attendance. You will need to keep track of your exit codes for each of the sessions that you attend. The exit code for this session is 16382. Thank you for watching.